Who is Anonymous Sudan? Just in recent days, they attacked Microsoft, LinkedIn, UPS, OpenAI, governmental and military establishments across Sweden, Germany, and Israel, and the entire European banking system. All of these giants overrun by a group of scrappy tech enthusiasts from a war-torn country with a barely functioning internet connection. At least that's if you believe their own story. And oh boy, do they know how to spin it. But is there any truth to it? Are they the Anonymous we all know? Are they really from Sudan? And where does the money for all these high-level operations come from anyways? Let's look into this. We all know Anonymous, the infamous international hacktivist movement united by its anti-establishment goals and a love for that particular mask. In the early 2010s, Anonymous played a part in Arab Spring revolts. Branches of the collective sprung up in countries across North Africa and the Middle East. Sudan had a branch too, in the form of several social media groups spreading the philosophy of Anonymous and calling for political change. But it never got prominent, except for that one time in 2019 when people calling themselves Anonymous organized several cyber attacks on the Sudanese government. Or rather, they didn't get prominent until 2023 when suddenly a new Anonymous Sudan emerged. In January, somebody registered a group on Telegram, an app beloved by dissidents and criminals alike, and started attacking people with vigor. Their first target was Sweden, the entire country of Sweden. The Swedish government, banks, companies, universities, and scores of other web pages got hit as a sign of protest.
What they originally tried to do was rather specific. They were trying to capitalize on a Swedish right-wing extremist called Rasmus Paludan, who probably, incited by right pro-Russians to burn a Quran outside the embassy of Turkey. And that's pretty obvious to us. That is something they did. They tried to amplify it. They tried to stir up wedge issues between the Islamic world and the Western world, and specifically Turkey.
However, despite being from Sudan and fighting against the enemies of Islam, Anonymous Sudan communicated in quite a peculiar way. Their posts were only in English and Russian, and they instantly got picked up by prominent Russian hacktivist groups such as Killnet, who took it upon themselves to promote this newcomer. The newcomer instantly responded by endorsing the Russian government and vowing to fight alongside it because it is helping Sudan. This may sound implausible until you consider that in the current Sudanese civil war, Russia actually arms and supports both sides of the conflict. So at least they're not wrong. But this is not how things tend to work in the region. There is a whole ecosystem of Muslim hacktivist groups, some of them pro-government and others anti-government, some of them more radical and others less so, all of them interconnected in various complex ways. And Anonymous Sudan just doesn't fit into that picture. And they fit even less into the framework of Anonymous, who not only disavowed them, but conducted operations to strike down the infrastructure Anonymous Sudan uses.
When Anonymous started from the beginnings, their motto or what guided them was basically anti-establishment movement, and Anonymous Sudanese are clearly affiliated with Russian government.
So we can be pretty sure Anonymous Sudan has nothing to do with Anonymous. What comes next is pretty interesting. So ever since being created in early 2023, Anonymous Sudan exclusively attacked the countries that are at odds with Russia. And many people who analyze their activities draw the line at this. But this does not prove they're from Russia. We need stronger evidence to allege that. Do we have it? Well, we do. These attacks were organized exclusively in collaboration with Russian hacker groups, and they never even tried interfering with Sudan's internal affairs.
They were communicating in Russian. Their social media page was created in Russia. If you look at the Telegram records, they were basically mostly amplifying other Russian hacktivist groups.
The media was still sometimes referring to them as a religious hacktivist group, so the cover worked. At least until cybersecurity researchers started looking into their activity And then just saying you're from Sudan was no longer enough.
And what happened since then is that as we in TrueSec and other cybersecurity researchers pointed out that, hey, they claim from the Sudan, but they only communicate in Russian and so on. They have changed their MO. They started to go back and delete their old posts, and suddenly they find someone who can start posting in Arabic and so on. First, they had a guy who speak Arabic, but it was a pretty, the kind of Arabic you learn in school. So, and then we pointed that out. And then suddenly they found someone who actually can speak Arabic with a Sudanese dialect.
So it is quite apparent that Anonymous Sudan is neither anonymous nor Sudanese. But who precisely are they? To uncover that, we have to look into how the group operates. So the main method of attack for Anonymous Sudan are DDoS attacks, or Distributed Denial of Service attacks, and they're quite easy to understand. The main idea is this: whenever you want to visit a web page, your device sends a request to a server where that web page is stored, and the server shows you the web page. But if there are too many requests, the server might get overloaded, which is an easy thing to exploit. All a hacker has to do is send a lot of requests to a server.
Huge amount of requests. You fill up the memory, and basically any new requests from legitimate users are then blocked and you don't see the website. Does that do any actual damage to the server? Nope. To the website? Nope. Does that hit the headlines? Yes, because the website is unreachable.
But large companies tend to invest a lot into protection from DDoS attacks and can fend them off pretty effectively. So the latest generation of hacker groups does something a bit more sophisticated.
Traditional DDoS attacks mostly consists of botnets. IoT devices infected by bots like the Mirai bot to create these mass SYN attacks, so-called volumetric attacks or layer 3, layer 4 attacks. Recently, more and more, the most qualified DDoS attacks are those that comes from so-called HTTP-based attack. And that is someone rents a number of VPSs in some company that doesn't ask too much, and then use them to generate lots of HTTP-based traffic, malformed traffic that generates fewer calls, but because they are HTTP-based, they can actually jam even better than the volumetric because they're harder to filter out.
While such attacks are scarier and can bring down a web page for longer, it is often possible to single out where the attack came from, at least if the IP addresses have been tied to a particular company that supplied them. And in the case of Anonymous Sudan, yeah, they were buying their traffic from some high-end suppliers in Germany and paying them some serious cash. These same servers were routinely used by other Russian hacker groups such as Killnet and NoName. And yes, they were the same ones the real Anonymous attacked in their counterattack against the imposters. Since then, the group moved on to other services. And from the fact that it increased its volume of attacks significantly, we can assume that its spending also had to increase a lot. So yeah, they're not the scrubby guys with slow internet connection, that's for sure. But where do they get their income? That's a bit less clear. The experts we talked to can only guess. Some say Anonymous Sudan may be financed directly by the Russian government, or by some oligarch, or as a proxy of some other money-making hacktivist venture like Killnet. By the way, you may have heard that a few weeks ago, Anonymous Sudan, Killnet, and REvil created the so-called Darknet Parliament, a sort of alliance to coordinate their attacks. Since REvil was dissolved a couple of years back and now is only a sock puppet for Killnet, it sounds very plausible that Anonymous Sudan works in the same way too.
I think this is a lot to do with Killnet and the leader, Killnet Killmill. He's known for trying to monetize everything. He has the Killnet crypto exchange. They're selling Killnet jewelry online. Like, he's good at hype, basically. And I think this is a way, use the REvil name is now available because REvil doesn't exist anymore. But it still, resonates in some easily fooled group. So he can use it to make it sound as if they're doing much worse things than they're doing.
A lot of hacker groups who organize these mass DDoS attacks have their crowdfunding efforts, sponsors, or some other way to generate cash and buy those expensive servers. So the attacks turn into this vicious circle of promising incredible results like taking down an evil bank, or a tech giant or a government, finding an audience that wants to see the world burn, squeezing some funds from that audience, and doing that again with grander and grander goals in mind. Now, if Anonymous Sudan is really just another money-making venture of Killnet, at least Killnet's backers see the results that are worth their money, right? Right? Okay, they don't. The way Anonymous Sudan and similar gangs describe their attacks mostly does not reflect reality. They constantly talk of destroying Microsoft or European Investment Bank or some other target. But all they actually do is overload their websites with DDoS for several hours, and that's it.
Like, for example, right now, they claims to have hacked and closed the European bank transfer system. They downed the website for the international bank. That's not the same. So they love to hype this up. And this is part of their MO. This is typical Killnet MO. Like, they DDoS, I think it was the website for the Copenhagen airport, and then they put a picture on the Telegram channel showing a burning plane, as if somehow airport exploded because of this cyber attack. So it's a lot of hype. That's all.
I think it's part of propaganda. You know, not a lot of people know when media writes that there's been a cyber attack. You know, a cyber attack is a cyber attack, and an attack is an attack. It doesn't do actual damage. It's just clout.
So, I hope you enjoyed our short look into these new kinds of hacker groups and learned something new. We have a list of our news videos about Anonymous Sudan in the description. Check those out. And if you'd like to see our deep dives into other cyber gangs, click on one of the videos on the screen. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.